start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m.
as we debate the week's stories, controversies and issues.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
It's 5 times the opinion, 5 times the debate,
and 5 times the fun.
the Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You could wink at the end.
I can't
Britain's
wink,
listening.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Good evening. In a moment, headliners. But first, let's bring you the latest news headlines. And we begin this bulletin with some breaking news that's just come to us from the United States. Donald Trump has been indicted by a grand jury in Manhattan in New York and is now the first former or sitting US president to face criminal charges. That's after an investigation into alleged hush money payments given to adult film actress Stormy Daniels during his 2016 election campaign. These charges come just days after the former president launched his 2024 Republican nomination campaign in Texas. He condemned the investigation, claiming he's the most innocent man in US history. And some other breaking news this evening as well. Turkey's parliament has approved a bill to allow Finland to join NATO, as Ukraine's president has marked 400 days of the war today. More details on that as we bring you news tomorrow on GB News. Turkey was the last of 30 members in the Western Defence Alliance to ratify Finland's membership after Hungary approved a similar bill earlier in the week. Finland and Sweden applied to join the alliance last year in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but the process was held up by Turkey and Hungary. Now, in UK news, the mother of a 9-year-old girl who was shot in her own home in Liverpool last year says she's ecstatic that her daughter's murderer is now behind bars. Olivia Pratt-Corbell was killed last August when Thomas Cashman chased down a convicted drug dealer to her front door. Merseyside police released CCTV footage of the chase. Olivia was killed shortly after these moments that you can see if you're watching on television. The 34-year-old has been found guilty of her murder and of the attempted murder of Joseph Nee. Cheryl Corbell held her daughter's pink teddy up as she left the court today. Now, His Majesty the King has made history by becoming the first British monarch to address the German Parliament, giving a speech in both German and English. King Charles made the invasion of Ukraine a focus of his speech, describing the war as unprovoked and later telling Ukrainian refugees that he was praying for them. He also condemned what he called the unimaginable suffering of innocent people. Defence Secretary Ben Wallace has addressed an alarming rise in sex offence cases within the military, saying that things are changing. He said the rise is due to victims feeling more confident about coming forward. 300 Sexual Offences Act investigations were launched by the Royal Military Police last year. That's almost a 50% rise on the year before. And that comes as a team of inspectors detailed alleged reports of racist, homophobic and misogynistic behaviour in the Fire and Rescue Service in England over the last 5 years. Now, with the Easter holidays just around the corner, there could be travel disruption for many. Security guards at London's Heathrow Airport have planned to go on strike now for 10 days. That's after last-ditch talks failed to resolve a dispute over pay. 1,400 Unite members will walk out from tomorrow until Easter Sunday. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on the TuneIn app. You're with GB News, the People's Channel. It's time for Headliners.
Hello, I'm Leo Kearson. Welcome to Headliners. Joining me tonight to go through tomorrow's top news stories are Josh Howie, who's a comedian, it says on his LinkedIn profile, and Nick Dixon, who's a better comedian and substantially easier to work with. Anyway, how are you doing, both of you?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great.
You're having a good day, right?
Oh, totally.
That's the first nice thing you've said about me, but it had to come at the expense of someone else, sadly. But
yeah, that's how
we
it
just
works.
cut, by the way, to an empty sofa.
That's traditional from me on a Saturday.
that represents our careers after this. Carry on.
Anyway, let's go through the front pages of tomorrow's papers. We've got the Daily Mail with monster whose tears were only for himself, not the little Olivia, the innocent he murdered. The Guardian has families face a £700 hit with wave of tax and price rises. The Express has, yes, justice for Olivia, sounding strangely upbeat there. The Mirror has justice for Olivia. The Eye has pensions blow for people in their 40s, work until age 70. And finally, the Daily Star has psycho killer chatbots are befuddled by Wordle. And those were your front pages. We're going to start the show off with some breaking news. It's unprecedented, so it's missed the front pages because it's only just come out. But tell us about it, Josh.
Yeah, Trump, it looks like he's going to be indicted. That literally just came out, so I don't know if that means that all of these newspapers that are about to go through, we just throw them all away and go home. Yeah, so he had an affair, or he allegedly had an affair with this adult film star, Stormy Daniels.
Stormy Daniels.
Big fan
don't pretend you don't have an
No, I am a big fan of her early work. It all got a bit avant-garde afterwards. But he's never admitted to having the affair. But what he has admitted is that he paid her off with $130,000,
which could be seen as break campaign rules.
Well, this is the reason why he's going to be indicted. Is it's because the money came from he claimed them as legal expenses,
right?
And that is against the law.
Right, so it's marking things down. I mean, as a comedian, Nick, you must have marked things down on your tax return.
Yeah, I haven't paid tax for many, many years. No, I'm always very, very honest about it, and it's good because then they give you those COVID payments, and it's good to have been honest. Anyway, this story, I mean, someone gave me the wrong story, then I had the right story. It doesn't really matter because it's all the same. It's all the Dems and the Blob, the US version of the Blob, trying to get Trump on anything. Yeah. None of his supporters care. The Dems all hate him anyway. It's not going to make any difference to voting. Some people say it's going to increase his vote. I don't even know if it's going to do that. But some people think it's like 4D chess. They're like, oh, they want DeSantis, so they do this. Or they want us to think they want DeSantis. I'm not sure it even is. I think they just like to harass Trump,
but
attack him on anything.
It's about the sort of fifth time they've tried to bring Trump down with various things. They've searched his home.
Russia hoax.
Yeah, the Russia hoax.
Failed impeachments, two of them.
But these things are ongoing in terms of the supposed election subversion, overturning the 2020 result, the classified records. So those things, and his business dealings, and he's got a defamation suit. Those things are all ongoing. But this here is a definitive, actual.
Yeah, but no one cares. No one thought.
Well, some people do care.
No one cares.
Talking about it.
No. It's good to talk about. I mean, it's not going to change any voters' minds who already hate. You hate him already, so you still hate him.
No, I don't hate
like him. I still like him.
Nick, don't you think this is just going to invigorate Trump's campaign and invigorate his base to come out and support him?
That's fine. I agree with that. But that's not the point here. The point is he did something wrong. Are you saying he didn't do something wrong?
No, I'm saying they've tried to get Trump on everything. This is a billionaire real estate guy in New York, and the things they found in him are so minor.
Yeah. So this is
Hunter Biden. This is a slow afternoon for Hunter Biden.
I told you, $130,000.
Hunter Biden laptop, the big guy, the China thing, the Ukraine thing.
But you're doing whataboutery now.
I am, and I love it.
He has committed a crime. Why are you sort of going, oh, it's 4D chess?
Because it's a misdemeanor. Any civilian did it, it would be a misdemeanor. No one gets punished that much for this kind of thing.
Has he done wrong?
He's
the ex-president of the United States.
He's done something minorly wrong. Come on, John, you're not that naive. In this level of politics, this is very minor. I don't care. You can care.
Nancy Pelosi's millions that she's made.
It's not great.
Well, and if she's done wrong, she should be indicted as well.
It's not ideal to pay off.
I'm just saying he's done something wrong.
But don't you think this will play into his victimhood complex?
Absolutely.
And he'll be able to paint himself as a martyr with some justification.
Absolutely. And he's already raised millions of dollars. I'm not arguing about any of those points. They're all valid. But to say that it's nothing is wrong. He has committed a crime.
I mean, the final point about this is from a voter's point of view. So Donald Trump paid Stormy Daniels £130,000. Bill Clinton paid Paula Jones £850,000. So who's the better negotiator? Who's the better leader?
Who was better?
Can I say
who was better? Stormy Daniels was obviously.
Can I say one last thing though? The only thing it seems to have done is it seems to have confused DeSantis into attacking Trump, and most people think that on the sort of that side think that was a mistake.
Right.
So it may have done a little bit of work in confusing DeSantis and damaging his campaign a little bit.
They're playing them off against each other.
Maybe.
Anyway, let's go to the actual front pages. What does The Guardian run with, Nick?
Well, they've got families face £700 hit with wave of tax and price rises, and this is just, it's going to hit families around 50 who are on like 50,000 income, and they're talking about it's going to cost them £700 a year. Council tax bills will increase by £99 as well from April 1st. This comes from CEBR Economic Consultancy, and they've just gone into how this tax thing is going to hit the average family. And we're meant to be a comedy show, and this is probably the hardest possible story to make funny. Even like really bad things at a certain level, you might be able to make funny if they're like really stupid policies. But this is like small but crushing changes in tax to families. So I've got nothing, Josh.
Well, no, it's just because inflation. A lot of things that we pay for in terms of contracts, mobile phone bills, TV, everything is connected to inflation. So come April 6th, new tax year, they get to reset their prices, and they're resetting them according to what inflation was plus whatever the percentage point was.
They want to gouge us for money.
Yeah, absolutely. And now they're just going to whack it all up, and like £700. It's a lot of money.
But isn't the real problem that the government is just growing? Government year on year takes a bigger share of GDP, and we're just seeing it grow and grow. No government ever votes to reduce its own power.
Right, except arguably Liz Truss, to make a smaller government, and you saw what happened to her.
Yeah, the blob. The blob didn't like it.
Smaller government for rich people. But there's also quite an interesting story here about Putin's global cyber warfare. I think we all knew about it, but this is sort of much more investigative story, and it literally taking up just entire blocks within Moscow. And it's a huge deal. And to see they're tapped into Nick's feed, and they're just pumping that stuff in there.
Well, Russia has the next 50 years of war planned out on everything, on cyber, on possible assassinations.
They don't seem to have planned the actual war very well.
They mess that up. No, these are all strategies and theories. But, it's like Mike Tyson says, it all goes out the window when you get punched in the face by Ukraine. So,
yeah. I mean, we used to think that Russia had the best, second best military in the world. At the moment, it's got the second best military in Ukraine. But anyway, what's in the cover of the Times, Josh?
Retire early if you did not go to university. This is actually a really good idea. This is people who go, who basically have jobs like involving actual labour, very much unlike us, of course, who just drink milk and water and get away with it. Could retire earlier, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I got a friend of mine who's a joiner. He's 50 years old. He's a great joiner, but boy, he destroyed. Like his knees are destroyed. I mean, the physical labour of working those days it takes a really big toll.
His knees are destroyed. So he's one of these people who should have actually been lifting with his back.
Yeah, well, no, because you're spending a lot of time on your But I think it's a really good idea, actually. There's another story we've got later about universities, and maybe they're not worth the price. This would suggest another reason why, actually, if you want to just. By the way, my friend is doing very well for himself and has got a much nicer house than I do. But the point is, there is a price to be paid for that physically.
Yeah, I totally understand. If you've done hard manual labour, you do deserve a break. However, I'm a bit peeved that the state pension age must rise from 69 to 69 or 70 for anyone born after 1979. I feel like, why am I always being attacked for being born after...
How old are you?
Much younger than you, just very young.
But when was your birth? What year?
Many years after that. Yeah, I never say because I'm in showbiz.
And also, how much do you weigh?
I'm working on it. But but it's kind of annoying that it's our generation my generation, not so much you guys, but at least we're beating the French, Leo, because they want to retire, as you know, at about 39 or something.
Yeah. After doing those difficult 3-hour days.
So 1975?
Me? Mate, I'm a millennial.
Oh,
you guys
okay.
are all Gen X.
We're Gen X. You're looking pretty good, though, aren't we, Leo? Well, you are.
It's all makeup. Anyway, we've got the Daily Star.
Oh yeah, psycho killer chatbots are befuddled by Wordle. So this is the one we're all worrying about. AI, it's so advanced, it's going to take over the world. It's like, no, give it a simple word puzzle, and it's to do. It's like a really bad Terminator movie. It just ends with them failing to do a wordle. Everyone dies. But it's to do with how the letters are entered into the system, and this has completely befuddled AI. Apparently, seems like you could just probably fix it in an afternoon.
But why did they not fix it? Well, yes. They left it there. That would be the loophole. Remember, like War Games with Matthew Broderick, and then they defeated the computer with like a simple game.
This
could be
the kryptonite of the AI.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've never seen a computer I can beat up with an axe.
Right.
But then it disappears into.
Well, the thing is, Leo, though, they'll access those robot dogs that will then attack you. You know what I mean? It'll send them onto you.
I reckon I could do one of them in.
But
what about a nuclear warhead?
Pour some water on it.
I do like this idea of people trying to cheat on Wordle.
Yeah.
By going on to a chat.
Yeah, because I thought Wordle would be the perfect thing for software to solve. It's just
and it can't do palindromes and whatever. I can't do cross.
It's the kind of thing like in the 50s, there were those whole rooms of computers and they were solving one Wordle on their own. You know what I mean? It's kind of like that level, isn't it? How can we not solve a Wordle? But anyway, there it is.
Anyway, that's the front page is done. But after the break, we've got a baby boom. Who might grow up to now actually learn about biological sex, but will probably be destroyed by AI? See you in a couple of minutes.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m.
as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners with me, Leo Kearse, and the two comedians I most respect and look up to, Josh Howie and Nick Dixon, who may be responsible for writing that link. Anyway, kicking off things today with Friday's Guardian. Josh, and hell is freezing over, or is Labour freezing taxes?
Yes, Labour would freeze council tax for 1 year, says Keir Starmer. This is their launch of their local elections, which are happening on 4th of May. 8,000 council seats up for contestation. Contestation, is that a word? Being contested.
It can be.
Let's make it a word. And this is his thing. They're saying that he's pledged to freeze, to use the windfall tax to then freeze council taxes for everybody, because like we were just talked about, they're going to go up £100. But then later on, there's a sentence here that says, however, Starmer would not commit to freezing council tax if Labour won the next general election.
It's just some promise. It's a promise, not a thing we'll actually do.
We would do it, but I'm not. Maybe, I don't know. Let's see where we get in.
Also, it seems like the weakest of all tax cuts. It's like we're going to freeze council tax for 1 year. That's not a long-term solution to me being any richer, is it, Nick?
No, it's not much, is it? On one hand, the Tories create such an easy target by being high tax, which is one thing they're not supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so Labour are saying things like we're the party of lower taxes for working people. Like, really? I thought I was Conservatives. Because really, Labour are the party of the metropolitan Liberal elite, as we know.
Yeah.
But Starmer's trying to be all things to all people. He's also saying crime's been going totally unpunished. So he's trying to...
You mean he's trying to win an election?
No, I mean, he's known for this. He doesn't really take firm stances on anything, and he tries to work out what's the best thing to say. But as you pointed out, he's not going to do anything. It's just the more empty Starmer rhetoric.
Yeah, but then the idea is, of course, that this might also push Rishi. And there's been a few Labour policies. People always say, oh, they haven't got any policies. But what's happened over the last couple of years is Labour has come up with a policy and then the Tories just basically nick it. This could have an impact, but it also really pushes the point that, yes, you're right, it is seemingly nothing but £100. But to those families who... Their money, they're losing another £700 this year in taxes. That 100 is a chunk of it. And the point is that affects a much broader group of people.
No, I'd love council tax to be frozen, but it won't happen anyway. It's a good idea. It won't necessarily happen, as we've just said. And
we'll see. He refused to commit to it. But
you don't watch clips of Starmer refusing to commit to stuff. This is what he does. The funny thing is, if Sunak was Labour, you would love him. I
don't mind. I think he's all right. I don't hate anybody, mate.
Well, in fact, things are looking a bit shaky. I mean, a Starmer bounding to victory like Tony Blair in '97 or whenever it was, seemed like it was a done deal just a couple of weeks ago. But Rishi has been so successful in so many fronts. Yeah. He's got rid of Sturgeon. There's
the Brexit deal.
Yeah, but that Sturgeon thing could backfire because if Labour wins 20 seats up in Scotland now, which they're being predicted, I know that is right now they are.
But they'd only take them from the SNP, so in terms of the electoral arithmetic, it wouldn't make...
It would still add to
Labour's total, yeah.
So anyway, we'll see, but I agree. I think Rishi's actually played a pretty good game so far.
Yeah.
Whether it's enough, we'll see.
Anyway, Thursday's I next, and when I was at school, there was a craze for mullets. Now the mania is for kids gender transitioning, which is a bit harder to grow out when fashions change, Nick.
Yeah, well, speaking of Rishi, this is Transgender Guidance for Schools to be published this summer, says Rishi Sunak. And it's good. He's saying it's important that parents know what's going on. And this was on the front page last night. It's the Policy Exchange think tank. And they've said that schools have been effectively facilitating medical interventions on site by supporting pupils and supporting means really encouraging them to change gender more than they should be. It said that they asked more than 300 secondary state schools, and it turned out that 40% of schools allow pupils to self-declare their gender without parental consent, which is obviously weird and wrong and creepy.
Yeah.
And, it's great that Sunak's doing this, and hopefully it's enough because adults, by being part of this dangerous cult, have put children in danger in a despicable way.
Well, they haven't just put them, they have... This danger has occurred.
Yes.
I mean, 40% of our schools going through with this gender ideology, that's an incredible figure. Yeah. And people argue, oh, it doesn't happen, oh, it's 1 or 2 schools. No, this is showing how much of a chunk has been sort of taken over by this ideology. Yeah. And that's not, you guys know, but... this has a real-life impact on people. Certainly, young girls, teenage girls, becoming medicalised, becoming infertile, unable to have healthy sexual relationships. And if they were left alone and not just sort of pushed down this route, which is what these schools essentially are doing, they would just come out the other end and just be normal kids, probably lesbians, totally fine with a healthy life.
Yeah. Well, transgenderism seems to have replaced anorexia.
Well, you see the chart.
Young teenage girls as the sort of preferred social contagion of the middle class.
Have you seen that graph? graph.
Yeah,
It shows like that the last 10, 15 years, and then that's the one for anorexia.
Yeah.
That's not fingers, by the way.
That's the wrong.
Yeah, make sure you get that in there. Nearly killed Leo with humour. Do you know say how I feel about this story? Much like the World Athletics trans ban, you sort of celebrate and go like, this is great. Then you realise, you feel a bit like you found your keys. You're relieved for a minute, then you realise, actually, nothing's really changed. You just wasted half an hour. Like, we're just coming back to normal, you know what I mean? It's very important this stuff happens. But we haven't actually achieved anything. We've just come back to basic sanity.
And also, sorry, and just one is just the fact that he's doing it so rushed, because the fact that this has been going on for so long, and people always say, oh, this is just a distraction from the immigration, from all the other rich.
Yeah.
No, this is a massively important thing. They need to be sorted. It should have been sorted a long time ago. I'm glad they're on top of it.
And people on the right are accused of stoking culture wars, but it wasn't us who went into schools and started convincing children to transition.
Tory government.
Anyway, well, yeah, you got a point. On to the Telegraph now, and Josh, it seems like my baby is part of a boom.
Indeed, baby boom in second year of COVID pandemic as lockdown restrictions eased. I think that is, you've got a very beautiful daughter. That's around the same time, isn't it?
Well, it sounds like you fancy her.
Not yet.
That's coming right after the fingers as well. This is... we're about to get nuked by Ofcom.
Anyway, so... but...
How long are you going to give it, Josh?
I don't think we're friends anymore. Anyway, I don't think. Anyway, I'm not babysitting, right? So,
not anymore.
Look, I can't even think right now.
Do you want me to take over?
No,
please.
No, in 2021, conceptions rose for the first time in 6 years, with record pregnancies for women aged 30 to 34. This is somewhat interesting because with lockdown, the question is, did it happen because people were locked down and they came out and they were essentially horny? Or I believe it could be people maybe reevaluating their lives and going, you know what? What's important to me, and realising the importance of connection and
well, or maybe for some of us, our pull-out game was just a bit off. Nick, what do you think?
Well, you can find out what it is all in the stats. So firstly, this is the first good side effect of lockdown. It's all been awful effects, but the birth rates are still catastrophically low because they're still much lower than 10 years ago. They've just gone up slightly because of this. But if you look into what it is, it's a certain group. It's single women. It's not married or civil partnerships. It's basically single people who are not married, getting a bit bored because of lockdown. They were cooped up too long. Then they've overdone it a bit.
That's the biggest increase, but there is an increase in all the different groups.
Yeah, so there's that
biggest,
trend in general as well, perhaps, yeah. But unfortunately, it's not enough to reverse our catastrophically low birth rates. I mean, you've got Bill Maher and all these people ranting on about there's too many people, and they haven't realised yet there's actually too few people, and we're all in terrible trouble.
We need Albanians.
we just...
Well, this is literally what the government has done. I mean, immigration is the perfect solution to lower population because you don't need to spend the money and invest in schools and everything, growing people from zero. You can just bring them over here when they're 22.
Yeah, but there are so many countries now with a low birth rate. That's not going to work forever, is it?
Yeah.
And you can only get them from certain places. It's a massive problem. Everyone's talking... Well, no, it's true. You can't just take people from places that have a low birth rate. Well, anyway, maybe you can. It's a range.
Madonna can.
My point is, people are all like talking about climate change is going to kill us. What's going to kill us is the rhetoric around climate change, meaning that people stop having kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, staying with the Telegraph, there's more evidence that Joe Biden doesn't do well without a teleprompter, Nick.
Yeah, this is appalling. So Joe Brandon...
Let's go.
You're turning into
I'm
him.
Joe Biden now. Yeah, I've just done exactly what he does. Look, I've got my cards here. Talk to Leo. Address Josh. Sit on left. So yeah, I got confused because it's "Let's go Brandon," which when that means something else. But that is a Joe Biden meme. So Joe Biden branded. You can see how I did it. Joe Biden branded a disgrace for joking around Nashville shooting, and this is really disgraceful. So they cut to him on Fox News. And they were thinking, oh, we'll be making a serious statement about this horrific shooting. But no, he was doing basically stand-up comedy. Yeah. He was saying, I just came down for the ice cream. It was really appalling.
And there was another clip. I don't know if you saw the
Josh Hawley thing.
Yeah.
So Josh Hawley had said to him that this is a hate crime against Christians. They said to Biden, is it? And he goes, well, I don't know. And they go, well, Josh Hawley says it is. He goes, well, then I don't think it is. And then says, oh, I'm just kidding. So he's having a partisan joke. He laughs. So completely got the tone wrong. But that's because, as we know, it's Christians that have been killed by a trans person. So it's a problematic shooting for them. It's a disgusting way to have to say it. But imagine a straight straight white Christian man kills a black man and some children, which is what's happened here, they'd be all over it. Biden would be teleporting to Nashville, but he hasn't even visited Nashville. So this creates a political problem for the Dems because it's the wrong kind of shooting for them. All they do is talk about guns ownership, which is never going to change, and they keep going on about that. And they actually had a chance, the Dems, in the Senate to put through a thing where police would be at schools, which Ted Cruz tried to get through. They said no, they didn't, completely rejected it. There's 135 billion unspent from the COVID relief fund they could pay on and spend it on that. They won't do it.
Safe.
Yeah, because they ideologically want guns to go, and they're never going to go. So the utopian idea about guns, so it stopped actual pragmatic things happening. But as I say, it's grotesque, but this is the wrong kind of killing for them.
Can I say my bit?
Yes.
Yeah. This is a shameful article in the Telegraph. I'm sorry, I hate using the term fake news, but this is exactly what it is.
This is not fake news.
Okay, no, I saw the clip, and it's
There are 2 clips.
No, I know that. Let's talk about the first clip, which is him joking about ice cream.
Yeah.
It was absolutely taken out of context.
That's absolutely not true.
Well, okay,
Quite often, he was giving a briefing to some small businesses, so his original plan would have been to be joking.
If you go on fact check,
he knew that he was going to be addressing
that's not my point. If you go on fact check, this is what happened, right? He was doing... Look, he was giving... Can I just say my piece?
Can I genuinely said that it was correct?
Can I please say... What they said was it was taken out. Can I please explain the context, and then you can please make your point?
Yeah.
OK, thank you. He was making... This whole thing was actually a talk about the Women's Business Summit. There were a bunch of children in the audience. And when he came out, those jokes about ice cream and joking around, I'm Mrs. Biden's husband, all that, were for the kids. He gets the kids to stand up, and then he uses that as a way, look, guys, we have a serious thing to talk about children. And then he goes in. Now, you missed that part of it, which I've seen, is the tone absolutely shifts from that, and he uses this lightness with the kids to try and make a serious point.
And what about the second point, when he makes an obvious crass joke?
All right, fine. So I got a point on the first one.
Well, no, because I mean, there's a small point in the room. It might have been the appropriate thing to do.
Doing crowd work.
There's precedent for briefings like that being interrupted when there's breaking news, when there's something the president has to address, and the president addresses it appropriately and specifically, and doesn't do like a bit of sort of freehand stand-up before.
Well, like I said, that was addressing a bunch of kids that were in the room.
But he knew he was being broadcast live, and it was not appropriate.
And why is he doing Greek Independence Day instead of going to Nashville?
Well, well, that's a separate point there. And what this article does is absolutely shift the timeline between the three, make it sound like all three coincide in the same day. The Greek thing is a day later. The way that they read this here, it's just like everything is mishmashed and confused. Okay. I'm not arguing that, but that particular clip which I saw, when placed in wider context, makes a lot more sense.
And what checked the fact checkers actually, they said there was some context. They didn't say it was completely misrepresented.
And what about the Josh Hawley? And the Josh Hawley joke you're saying is still bad taste.
Well, that's a separate point that we can talk about. I don't think it's a particularly good point. Yeah, certainly when you're talking about dead children, that isn't
to make a political point that's also a joke and then laugh about it.
Okay, well, that's a separate thing.
And do you agree, even accepting your point, with my wider point, that this killing it creates a problem for the Democrats? It's the wrong kind of killing for them, and they don't know how to handle it.
Well, they don't know. But certainly with this trans issue, there is no proof yet that it's an anti-Christian killing. That has not been proven as such by any means. They still haven't brought out her gender manifesto or whatever.
Seems to be a lot
but it was on a Christian school.
We've got to go to a break now, but come back in a couple of minutes for bad university degrees, Canada's new male champion women's power weightlifter, and why millennials don't like Friends. See you in 2 minutes.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back to Headliners and straight into Friday's Telegraph, which warns about worthless degrees, Nick.
Yeah, I'm just the guy to come to you for this, it turns out, because English literature was 8th in the table of worthless degrees. So the headline is the Mickey Mouse degrees that could damage your career prospects. And the average university degree leaves graduates with 45k in debt, which they only start paying off once their salary exceeds 27 grand, but it doesn't. It's basically what the findings are. And it's pretty depressing. And inflation has made it even worse, obviously. And it's sad that English literature is in there because it was destroyed by this post-structuralism, postmodernism garbage. So you don't even learn... Used to be that you learned something and it was at least good on its own terms, even if it didn't help you vocationally. Yeah. Now it doesn't do either. It doesn't help you get a job. You don't learn anything. And it's just the way the culture's changed. And we need to basically stop doing these pointless degrees. Or if we're going to do them, at least make them a good education rather than all this leftist garbage.
Or make them more affordable. I mean, university is more expensive than ever, so people are lumbering themselves with debt to just get pontificated at by blue-haired...
Yeah, I don't know why you're bringing in leftist things. The ones that they're talking about are things like translation, which doesn't make sense to me, like why you would need a translation degree. Do you speak French? Yes, you've got the job.
I can tell you why if you want, but...
No, I know. I understand your point for that one thing, but we're talking about a lot of degrees, including photography. That's not worth it. So the point is, like, is it worth it at all to go to university? There is a hidden thing that no one's actually seen is if you can keep your income below a certain level, which I've managed to do now for about 30 years, then you never have to pay the loan back. So in a way, you've sort of made an extra 45 grand on top of your...
And does it ever get... just get expunged from your...
Well, I've changed my name a couple of times.
You have to be like 60. Basically, what Josh is saying is being poor is a life hack, essentially, is what he's going for.
No, because you go to uni, have 3 proper fun years, and then you
just crushing years of misery for a long time.
And then you just have to spend the next 40 years not earning very much money.
Well, no, I think a lot of these degrees, I mean, like the one I did, film and media, which is a point, if you want to do film and media, just go and work in film or... I learned more in my first 2 weeks at a radio station than I did in the entire 4 years. Sorry, Stirling University, but it just wasn't, worth that money.
I think a whole generation was taught, sort of our parents' generation was sort of very well-meaning. In their generation, it was good to have a degree. It was a rare thing. It put you in a certain elite of society. Then it became meaningless and now outdated, and it's taken people a while to realise that.
Yeah, and it also connects to a story that's coming up next, where we're talking about there was this idea behind everybody doing a degree was that all of society would sort of shift to this higher middle space, but that's just not the reality. And like I said before, now you have friends of mine who, don't go to university. A friend of mine's kid, he just 16, left school. He's already probably earning more money than me. No, seriously.
Wow, he must have got a job at McDonald's. Anyway, we've got the Times next, and Josh, is David Starkey overrated?
Well, that's it. Equality is overrated, says David Starkey. Now, he lost his honorary fellowship at Cambridge a couple of years ago for his comments on slavery. But he was at this literary festival. He's 78 years old, and he said a couple of things. And what's kind of interested about this article in the Times is it quotes what he says, and I'll say that in a sec, but it doesn't then go on to explain what he meant by it. He's obviously a very intelligent man, and I'm sure he was saying these things, and he could have been saying them to be provocative, but the gist of it was, he says, human beings should not be equal. He said, human rights are a catastrophe, and Britain is a quasi-apartheid society. Now, that sounds bad, but I don't have anything to actually counter it, because it doesn't then say what the context was.
Yeah, it deliberately sounds bad, because it's a hit piece against Starkey is what it is. You can tell, and they include this thing, audience members at the festival expressed surprise that Starkey had been invited. Oh, did they? That one of our foremost historians was invited to the festival. Did that bother you, low IQ people in the crowd? I mean, it's so stupid. I mean, he's saying that inequality is inevitable, which it is. Like, I'm funny, smart, good-looking, right? But I can't cook. Things are not totally equal across the board, Josh. We have different skills.
And I've got a much lesser quotient of delusion.
It's tough, exactly, it's tough. But, and his point about, when he says an quasi-apartheid society, Starkey often uses quite sort of provocative language, but what he means is, he says that we've introduced all these different rights groups, you know, identity politics, so everyone has their separate rights. And we have sort of, certain groups can say and do basically anything, others have to walk on eggshells, and I think that's what he's alluding to.
I mean, exactly, we talk about systemic racism, but really, if you're going to talk about systemic bias, I mean, the people who are walking on eggshells are the people who are discriminated against.
I know, but saying things like, we've introduced these human rights like gay rights and black rights and trans rights, and they're inherently divisive. But I don't think gay rights are inherently divisive, or black rights. Arguably, trans rights are, because they're a form of rights that take away from another protected group, i.e. women's rights. But black rights and gay rights don't take away from anybody else's rights.
I think the point he could be making there is, you know, so with you know, for example, the McPherson report, we've had this incredible drive to try and not be racist, which is, you know, an admirable objective.
And you're getting
we should all try and not be racist. But it's led to things like, so for example, the Manchester Arena bomber wasn't apprehended because the security guard was worried about looking racist. The grooming gangs weren't apprehended because the police, the social services were worried about looking racist. So it can have incredibly damaging effects.
Yeah, and when he talks about gay rights, remember Starkey's gay, and he was gay at a time when it was not exactly a picnic, and he was from Cumbria, born in Kendal, same as me. Not a great time to be gay, so he's hardly having an attack on gay rights. He's talking about identity politics.
OK, well, like I say, the article is very disingenuous because it doesn't actually say or place any of this in context, which is very frustrating.
Well, moving on to the Mail now. And Nick, is this your best chance of winning a medal?
Yeah, so this is a male powerlifter protests Canada's woke gender self-ID laws by saying he's a woman, entering the contest and smashing the bench press record like an absolute legend. So we've seen Zuby, who came in and won the female deadlifting record just to show how easy it was. Yeah. Then we've obviously seen trans athletes, biological men, coming in and destroying women's sports. This is a kind of variation on that, where a trans athlete, this guy, Andres, as he calls himself, did a video, smashed all the women's bench press record, and did a video saying, why are women so bad at bench press? Which is rubbing it in a bit. Yeah. To be fair, he did say, I mean, obviously I'm different because I'm trans, but it's like so weird, like some self-awareness, but not self-awareness that you're destroying a sport. Yeah. So in this guy, this legend, Avi Silver,
he's a famous male coach.
He's a coach. He's a lifting coach. So he just came in, smashed the trans person's record to prove, like, yeah, well, we can all identify as a woman and smash her record. And it's a good way of proving a point. And obviously, both these records should be erased, and all these trans records should be erased. And I think they probably will be in the near future.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be. Well, I think we're going to look back in this period of history and just be like, what on earth?
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. But then people, you know, who are fighting this ideology, they're like, no, it doesn't make any difference, or it only counts for a couple of people. Even though you saw the New Zealand weightlifter Laurel Hubbard, who got into the Tokyo Olympics in 2021, taking a space from a biological woman. And the point is, this is happening at elite levels, but the people who are stealing those places from elite female athletes are mediocre men.
Yeah, it's becoming, women's sport is becoming a dumping ground for mediocre male athletes. Anyway, Friday's Metro now, and Josh, why has Amanda Holden been given the golden buzzer?
Indeed, Amanda Holden under fire for woke comments about Paul O'Grady. Paul O'Grady, of course, died the other day. Very sad, bit of an institution, very funny person. And she was on radio and she said, you know what I loved about him? He was not woke in any way. And then a bunch of people, now this is in the Metro, which is a woke newspaper, arguably, and a bunch of people go online and say, oh, she doesn't even know what woke means or whatever. And I've seen this before, James O'Brien arguing online, and he's like, oh, yeah, well, define woke. That's the whole genius behind the word woke is it actually has these two different meanings.
Yeah.
And so people are like, oh, go into and even the writer here says, dictionary, anyone? Like, yeah, and if you look in some dictionaries, it just says what it is in terms of the idea of progressive thought, you know, and moving towards a progressive society. Fantastic, that's what we all want.
Yeah.
But some dictionaries also say, and it's a derogatory term because it sort of leans to far-right far-left fascism and the controlling of ideas and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So the point is, woke is used by different people to mean different things. And I think she was using it in that context of, like, i.e., he didn't care about censorship in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, the dictionary is wrong. I mean, I hate to go against the dictionary, but yeah, it's got the outdated version of woke, meaning aware of social injustice. Like you say, this particular dictionary doesn't have the updated version, which is...
Well, no, but the point is the dictionary I read has both definitions.
Yeah, exactly. So what Amanda Holden seemed to probably mean is that he wasn't PC. He used to say rants, to say opinions, and he wasn't PC.
And he wasn't using it to bully and to censor people.
But what's good about this to me is that wokeness now is known to be such a bad thing that just someone like Amanda Holden, not a particularly political figure, will just say, well, at least he wasn't woke, as a good thing. So it shows we're making some progress towards getting rid of woke.
Remember, a lot of people are still using woke in that other sense of
woke,
society, progression and whatnot. And so when you say, oh, woke, for them it's like a real...
But aren't they doing that disingenuously in many cases?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's finish this section with The Independent and Nick. Why are young people denying themselves the pleasure of the greatest sitcom ever made?
Yeah, so Jennifer Aniston says there's a whole generation of kids who will now find Friends offensive, and this pops up from time to time. Now it's popped up again because she's on sort of a press tour thing. But yeah, it's pretty pathetic. I mean, she said that it's tricky because you have to be very careful making comedy now. We used to be able to laugh at bigots in Friends, now you can't do that. Some things we got wrong, some things we got right, now you couldn't have it. And obviously we know Friends as the most mild comedy of that generation. You know, things like Brass Eye, which if these people watch, they'd just melt and combust. Whereas Friends was very mild. It's like a mild take on Gen X humour. And now it's too much for like Generation Z and everything. And yeah, it just shows how it's pathetic, isn't it? That Friends is offensive.
So this idea also, everyone's always criticising its lack of diversity of the cast. No one says that about like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Cosby Show, Different Strokes or whatever. These are...
They had lots of diversity, Josh.
Well, they didn't have much diversity. They featured a cast of a family of black people and, you know, Desmond's...
That's what diversity means. I mean, come on.
Well, that's
we all know that's what diversity means.
No, diversity is meant to be a spread of everybody, like, is the point.
Oh, no, that's what the ideal would be, but we know really it just means...
Okay, but the point is that I think it's, you know, a false criticism about that. And people say, oh, well, in New York, people are friends. Like, at the time, it wasn't. It's weird in America because it is still, or it was certainly 20 years ago, a somewhat segregated society, certainly in a place like New York and the different areas. It's different in London. So you don't notice anything like this. But I think in America, it probably was a little bit different at the time.
What we now have is a sort of crisis of the post-war liberal hegemony. When Friends came out, that was still riding high. We all had certain shared assumptions. There was a certain social cohesion. That's now completely gone. So Friends seems weird to people, whereas at the time it seemed completely normal. But the simple point I will say that's good about it is that it's another person, much like Amanda Holden in the last story, basically saying that our culture's got worse and wokeness has gone too far, and that's what's positive about it.
And it's, you know what, I think it still stands up, and my kids are watching it and they're loving it, and I don't think they're racist.
That's great. Anyway, the last break now, but some crackers in the final section. I'm not talking about us, including fatphobic teens, crying plants and vodka mums. Join us on the other side.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners and straight into Friday's Metro. And Josh, you know a lot about Midlife Crisis. How's your board game collection?
It's getting pretty big.
The sports car.
That is how my Midlife Crisis has taken. That's the direction. By the way, Midlife Crisis is a provenable. It says here that it's not sure if it is provable that it exists, but actually a book came out a couple of years ago that did prove it and showed the impact that it has on men in terms of when you cross over a certain line and then it can impact you in certain ways. The traditional way being, of course, leaving your wife and having affairs and all the other stuff. Or the other way, which is buying board games. Those are the 2 options you have left. But this is about millennials. Now, I was slightly confused because I think I've got millennials wrong in my head. I think of millennials as people who are born in... Millennials, it's not. It's people who are born a bit...
It's usually 81 is usually the earliest.
Oh, really? Okay, so
or
that's
80
it. So
maybe.
Okay.
So they're old now.
Yeah, so now they're 43, and this argument says, why aren't they, as they're approaching middle age or in middle age, why are they not having these midlife crises? And basically it's saying because their lives have been so stressful by just being forced to rent and going from pandemic to work crisis, inflation, all the other things, that they're not actually having space. They're already in crisis already. That's the gist of it. I don't agree with it at all.
Well, because you're Gen X. Firstly, they're not 43, they're 41. It says around 42. They're not 43. Let's all calm down.
I was thinking of you, you're 43.
They're very defensive there.
Well, I'm the earliest millennial. I'm what's called a geriatric millennial. I'm in but I have a Gen X mentality, but I'm technically millennial. And when it says here that millennials don't have a midlife crisis because their whole life has been one crisis, I do get that a little bit. It's post 9/11. It does feel like everything's been sort of very destabilised. But you do get this thing, don't you, midlife? It's sort of suddenly realising you've left certain things too late. You've ruined your life. And it's like, I'm more successful and productive than before, but with no hope. I think that's the difference, right? You just stared at me blankly. Is that not the feeling of middle age that you've left? You guys are doing well. You're happy.
Well, yeah, millennials
because you've had families.
Millennials have much less wealth than, for example, baby boomers when they were at the same age. Their share of the national wealth. And, to have a midlife crisis, you need to buy a red sports car and get an expensive girlfriend who's much younger than you, and they can't afford to do either of those things.
I think it's just a vague feeling that you've actually left certain things too late, and also a constant nostalgia for the 90s. That's what I think it is.
Which was the best decade. Anyway, we've got the Daily Star now, and fat activists say that you can be healthy at any size, but it seems you can't fit into airline seats at any size.
Yes, that is the problem. So, fatphobic, inverted commas, teen kicked off flight for complaining passengers' rolls, another inverted commas, were in his seat, and he means the rolls of fat.
It wasn't a ham and egg bun.
No, and it was as only a teenager can. He said that the seat should not have been listed as available if it was being used for someone's literal rolls. So, we're not laughing, of course, at the overweight community, but that is pretty funny.
Yes, we are.
Well, yeah, in that case, you both were. Yeah, basically, the guy was fat, and so he was encroaching into his seat. And I suppose if he was doing it with any other part of his body, like if he just put his arm around him, or something, that would be weird. But because it was his rolls of fat, the argument is you're fat-phobic. And they called this kid fat-phobic. They swore at him, and he was kicked off by the airline. And then they banned him. But then he appealed it, and he was reinstated. But he was kicked off the airline. So yeah, I mean, this is why I don't travel anymore.
No, but it's amazing. But supposedly you put it on Reddit, and then people were saying, "Am I the bad guy?" And loads of people were saying that he was. That seems incredible to me. Yeah. He or his parents.
He was rude, but right.
He's 18 years old. Have paid for a seat. Yeah. That's the seat from here to here.
Yeah.
If you've got someone in your space, whoever it is, whether it's even a baby's arm coming over because it's someone's heart, whatever it is, the incursion into that is unfair. So that person, and then it's sort of talking to all these different overweight people about their experiences going on flights and stuff. I'm sorry, you need to then book 2 seats.
Yeah.
If you're encroaching upon other people's space, then that is unfair.
Yeah, or maybe just stop eating so much. That's another.
Josh went full curb enthusiasm. You're encroaching on the space.
Oh, no, it is.
Full Larry David.
You're
right. Buy 2 seats.
You paid your money. And that's it. And I'm not going to feel sorry. I don't want to attack people for their life choices. And I appreciate that we live in this world of processed food where arguably we're all addicted and whether who's to blame or whatnot. No, I believe
got willpower.
Look, I'm on that and I haven't eaten for 12 hours and I'm about to faint. Right. But that's my choice. But the point is, I do see that we live in a world that has these conditions. But to sort of fob it off and pretend like, oh, look, I'm the victim here. Yeah. It's like, no, I'm sorry. That person paid for the seat.
I agree. Anyway, on to the Times, Josh, and those vegetarians sure have a lot to answer for.
Sure. Plants may cry out when stressed, scientists' recordings suggest. This is in Israel. They've been basically taking these plants into a soundproof chamber. It was thought before that plants didn't make any noise, but now they put all these sort of sensitive microphones, and it turns out that they do. And it's quite interesting because... and they sort of withdrew water from the plants, and they also sort of cut bits off, and they could hear them making these noises. The question is it like, was it not conscious noise, but some of it is like popping of the stems in terms of when they're dehydrated, and it happens like 5 days before. But what they're saying now, which is arguably more interesting, is what effect that has on the environment around them in terms of can humans in any way pick up these sounds, can the organisms, can other plants, can animals, and that's what's going to be interesting. Is there really a form of communication going on here?
Yeah, I mean...
Not funny.
They're calling it stress for plants. Is it really stress? I mean, they're not worried about the cost of living. It's really they're dying.
Are they
so
millennial plants?
They make a noise, exactly. But the one thing I like about it, not like's too strong, but surely this ends vegans' claim to have the moral high ground. If plants scream in pain, then why are vegans so good? They're the same as animals.
So from now on, vegans can eat nothing.
Correct.
Nothing but maybe mineral oil and rocks. I'm up for that. Anyway, the show is nearly over, so let's take another quick look at Friday's front pages. The Daily Mail has Monster whose tears were only for himself, not for the little Olivia, the innocent he murdered. The Guardian has families face £700 hit with wave of tax and price rises. The Express has yes, justice for Olivia. The Mirror has justice for Olivia. The Eye has pensions blow for people in their 40s, work until age 70. Let's tell the French people about it. And finally, the Daily Star has psycho killer chatbots are befuddled by Wordle. And those were your front pages. That's our show done for tonight. Thank you to my guests Josh Howie and Nick Dixon. Headliners will be back tomorrow at 11 p.m. with Nick Dixon in the hosting chair, Josh Howie and Scott Capurro. And remember that if you're watching the 5 a.m. repeat, stay tuned for The Breakfast Show coming up just after the break. See you soon. Bye.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today. Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Net Zero Day in Westminster. The question is, can we afford it? We'll join the battle to keep fighting for RAF Scampton. Yes, and that really, I think, matters hugely to our history and heritage in this country. And James Toseland will join us on Talking Pints, double World Superbike champion. What motivates somebody to do a sport as dangerous, frankly, as crazy as that? But before we get there, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thanks very much indeed, and good evening to you. The top story tonight. A man has been found guilty of the murder of a 9-year-old girl who was shot in Liverpool last year. Olivia Pratt-Corbell was murdered in her own home last August. Merseyside Police has released CCTV footage of the moment Thomas Cashman chased a convicted drug dealer towards Miss Corbell's home. Olivia was killed just moments later. He was also found guilty of the attempted murder of Joseph Nee. The King has made history by becoming the first British monarch to address the German Parliament, giving a speech in both German and English. King Charles made the invasion of Ukraine a focus of his speech, describing the war as unprovoked and telling Ukrainians he was praying for them. He also condemned what he called the unimaginable suffering caused by President Vladimir Putin. Here, the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has announced his party will freeze council tax bills this year. He unveiled the pledge at a launch of Labour's local election campaign in Swindon. The move would be funded, he said, by a windfall tax on the profits of oil and gas companies. And climate change protesters have disrupted Humza Yousaf's debut First Minister's question session as leader.
Hoping there might be another intervention from the gallery just to stop that long rant from Humza Yousaf that didn't address the question at all, because I specifically asked... Here they go.
Well, the presiding officer had to clear the public gallery at Holyrood after 5 separate interruptions. Mr Yousaf said the heckling stopped the Scottish Parliament from operating. Scottish Conservative leader Douglas Ross challenged the First Minister over his choice of cabinet appointments. Now, tonight, the White House has issued a statement saying US citizens residing in or travelling to Russia should depart immediately. That comes as an American reporter working for the Wall Street Journal has been arrested in Russia on suspicion of spying for Washington. Evan Gershkovich pleaded not guilty during his court appearance, according to state-owned media. But the court ruled Gershkovich could be held in custody until the end of May. The Health Secretary has accused the British Medical Association of adopting a political, militant stance in talks to resolve the junior doctors' pay dispute. Steve Barclay says the BMA has a precondition to negotiations of a 35% pay increase. The union denies that and urged the minister to get round the table, saying no credible offer has yet been made. Junior doctors in England will strike for 96 hours from the 11th of April. Those are your latest news headlines. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on the TuneIn app. You're with GB News, the People's Channel. Time for Farage.
Well, today the big story is net zero. Yes, this government pressuring absolutely full steam ahead for our net zero targets. Oddly, over the course of this week, the European Union are now beginning to row back. Yes, the big German car manufacturers are beginning to have their say. Internal combustion engines will go on being made in Europe beyond 2035. And you know what? They're going to use e-fuel. I don't know much about e-fuel, but if it works, it sounds great. But not here. No, Grant Shapps, the main man when it comes to net zero, says no new motor cars after 2030 will be made with the internal combustion engine. I think this is implausible, impractical, and it simply cannot work. But Shapps is there saying, no, we're going to invest money in carbon capture, invest money in energy saving, namely take wind farms, get the energy, store it in batteries. To me, all of this is a complete and absolute pipe dream. And most significantly today, he admitted there will be no cost savings to consumers for many, many years to come, which I read as being increased costs for many, many years to come. So the question is, can we afford our net zero targets? Give me your views. Farage at gbnews.uk. Well, I've got two men joining me tonight with very different views. Bob Ward from the Grantham Policy Institute, Ross Clark, freelance journalist, you write for the Mail, the Telegraph, etc. Bob Ward, we all want a cleaner, better world to live in. We may disagree on how urgent climate change is, etc. I thought the admission today from Grant Shapps that renewable energy is expensive and will cost households more was very significant. Basically, you want to put a big heat pump on your house, you get an energy, you will get a grant to do that. If you're using gas to cook, you're going to pay more. It's not very fair, is it?
Well, he didn't say that renewable energy is expensive. In fact, he said the opposite. Renewable energy is now cheaper. I mean, remember the cost of energy crisis that we're having and the cost of living crisis is because of the cost of natural gas, which has gone up massively as a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It's our dependence on fossil fuels that's causing us a problem at the moment. Renewable offshore wind is producing electricity at a far cheaper price.
Hang on a second. You're quite right. The initial invasion of Ukraine had pushed gas prices way up, but they're back down now, aren't they?
Yeah, but at the moment, the problem is that we have a system that means that the electricity price is set by the most expensive form of electricity generation that is on the grid at the moment, and at the moment that's gas. So even though wind is cheaper, we're paying a price for electricity generated by wind, which is set by gas.
And that has been a rip-off. That has been a rip-off to consumers. The fact that wind generation has been priced on gas.
But it's not the wind farms' problems, it's the regulatory system we've set up. And Grant Shapps said today it needs reform so that consumers do benefit from the fact that renewable energy is cheaper.
The wind farms could never have been built without taxpayer subsidy.
That's right. When it first started, they were more expensive than fossil fuels, and so you apply subsidies, and the prices come right down, and now it is cheaper than it is to generate electricity through gas. So the idea that you invest in technology so that the price comes down over time, I mean, that's exactly what you want. We do that with all technology.
If it was true, I'd be over the moon.
Well, it is true,
I would be
Nigel.
over the moon.
You should be over the moon.
I would be. I'm not convinced. Ross Clark, you are very much a sceptic about these policies. You know, Bob Ward talks there about the fact that the prices are coming down, etc. I was fascinated today by what Shapps had to say, because I got the impression that the poor will pay more for several years to come for their energy to subsidise the rich, who are going to put in heat pumps and everything else. Have I got it wrong? Was today a big transformation?
Yeah, well, it's always the way with green things. I mean, the normal rules seem to be reversed. I mean, most times we don't have regressive taxes. We have progressive taxes where you earn more, you have more wealth, you pay more tax. But when it gets to green things, all that seems to go out the window, and we pay huge subsidies to people with mansions to put in wood chip boilers and, buy, super-duper electric cars and so on. And yet the poorer people, they end up paying the bills because they get late into the market after, all the subsidies, electric car subsidies have gone. They've all gone now, the purchase subsidies. By the time the ordinary people, are forced to buy electric cars, there won't be any subsidy. And it's the same with heat pumps. We're putting these huge subsidies to relatively wealthy people to fit heat pumps in their house, but those subsidies will go eventually, and by the time the poor are forced to install them in their properties, they'll be paying the full.
But Ross Clark, you are a climate change denier.
No, I'm not. I do not resile from the idea the climate is warming, and that is almost certainly to do with human carbon emissions.
You think so, yeah?
But we've got to do something about it, but that has got to be balanced against having an economy and having people to, having basic living standards. We could go carbon-free tomorrow if we wanted to. We wouldn't have an economy. We'd have people starving. We'd have people shivering.
And this is where climate realism, Bob Ward, comes in. So this week, the European Union, and I was there for many years inside their parliament, and they were the high priests of, climate change theory. This week, they've decided that actually, post-2035, internal combustion engines can still be made, because Mercedes, I think, wanted it, and the big German car industry, but they will use e-fuels. We today, with Grant Shapps, are still committed to all cars after 2030 being electric vehicles. Now, I think in Beijing, they are absolutely, cheering to the rafters because they will dominate the electric car market. Don't you think, whatever your views on CO2, and I know where you stand on all of this, don't you think the EU, I can't believe I'm saying this, don't you think the EU are showing more realism on this issue than Grant Shapps?
Well, I think the EU have caved into lobbying by vested interests. The German car manufacturers have said, we think electric vehicles are going to be, part of the main part of it, but we want to have the opportunity to build these other vehicles that are powered by e-fuels. Well, I mean, the Americans are making a bet on the electric vehicle market. They've made a massive investment in it. They're attracting businesses from the UK back to the United States because they believe in electric vehicles, and the Chinese believe in electric vehicles. So we're going to have a battle here, and the question is whether you think Chinese and American electric vehicle manufacturers are going to win out over the Europeans, and where should we be? I'm happy either way, but I just don't think that the answer is going to be that we should slow down on phasing out petrol and diesel vehicles. Remember, petrol and diesel is still expensive, and electric vehicles will be cheaper.
2030 is unrealistic.
Why is it unrealistic? Are you giving up now already because the Germans have said, oh, it's too difficult, the Brits can't beat that?
No, I'll tell you why. Because without massive taxpayer subsidy and an increased cost for ordinary folk, it can't be done.
Taxpayer subsidy. Look at the massive subsidy we're having to pay at the moment for our dependence on fossil fuels.
What subsidy?
We're having to pay people's bills because it's too... What do you mean? What we've done at the moment is the price of natural gas is so high that the government has had to introduce a cap and is paying for the increased price of natural gas. It's a massive subsidy.
We should be producing our own. Now,
Where are you going to get it from, Nigel? Do you want to come back to fracking?
The Boland Reserve, of course.
I knew we'd come back to fracking.
Now, you see, there we are. So price is an issue. But have a look at this headline in the Times newspaper today. It really made me laugh because the Times are swallowing hook, line and sinker what the government are saying. Powering up Britain, push to build turbines and ditch gas in dash for energy security. I don't think I've ever seen anything more illogical and more moronic than that. And I'll tell you why. Because we're going to actually make people who use gas pay more money, the poor. The rich, who can get away from it, will get subsidised by it. Bob Ward, whatever you say to me, forget price for a moment, let's get on to energy security. We, in the last few weeks, fired up 2 coal-fired power stations. Such was the risk that literally the lights would go out in this country. Isn't it insane to call the Sharp statement today anything to do with energy security? It's the opposite. Green energy doesn't give us secure energy. There is no means of storing energy. We need gas or coal or whatever it is to back up wind.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. We need to develop storage. We need to do better matching of supply and demand. But remember that our dependence on natural gas makes us insecure. At the moment,
why?
Half of the gas we use every year has to be imported. We are not able to get it out of the North Sea. We
produce our own gas.
No, where are you going to get it from, Nigel?
We've got massive, decades of reserves of gas in Lancashire and Cumbria.
So let's go to the right. So I suggest that the next show you go down to the people in Pool and say how confident are they that the oil into could extract oil safely when we've just had an oil leak into Pool, and we've got now they're going to deal with the consequences of that for decades to come. It's going to affect the wildlife. It's washing up on Brownsea Island where you've got a rare red squirrel population. So it's fine if you could guarantee that it could be done safely, but what has happened is they say you cannot frack and guarantee the safety of the houses nearby.
Your attitude is let the rest of the world suffer these risks and just import energy.
No, I'm saying we have domestic clean energy is our best source of sustainable, cheap, secure energy.
What happens when the wind's not blowing?
So you do need a solution, and so what you can do is you can have storage that provides electricity storage. And I know, Nigel, that you tend to think that we'll never get beyond where we are now, but I keep mentioning to you that we've had huge developments in battery storage.
Yeah.
If you look at, for instance, the storage of batteries in mobile phones, they've improved massively. We are making huge progress. And if you bet against us ever, I'd like to take a bet with you now.
I'd love to know.
Renewables plus storage will be cheaper than fossil fuels 10 years
Ross
from
Clark,
now.
I've heard today, not just from Bob, but from Grant Shapps, energy storage and carbon capture will be major priorities. My problem is, I've been hearing this for 20 years. Is it realistic?
Well, the most interesting thing about today's announcement is this £20 billion going into carbon capture and storage development.
Yeah.
And what does that say to you? It says the government has coming round to realising that fossil fuels are going to have a future. Carbon capture and storage, I mean, it's a sort of embryonic technology, hasn't been proven on a large scale yet, but if you're going to put £20 billion on it, why would you want to do that if you weren't coming round to realise that fossil fuels are going to have to continue to be part of our energy mix? And the reason for that is because of the intermittency problem. When the wind's not blowing, the sun's not shining. At the moment, we are making up for that with gas. But by 2035, the government says it wants to do away with the gas. And what happens then? Really expensive energy storage.
Don't you think, just as the European Union this week has shifted its targets, has eased back on its zero carbon commitments, this 2030 target, after which no internal combustion engines are going to be made, is going to go, isn't it?
I think we are going to have to go down the same route as the EU, because no car manufacturer is going to make cars specifically for the UK market. they're going to, they want to sell them around the world now. So, if it becomes a standard product to have hybrids in future or internal combustion engines powered by e-fuel, then, Britain is going to have to allow them as well. Otherwise, British motorists would have virtually no choice.
I agree. What you get on GB News is people who disagree very strongly, but civilised, proper, open debate. It's called critical thinking. You can make your own minds up at home. In a moment, we're not allowed to use the word fat. Good Lord, no, that would offend everybody. And yet, could 50% of British fishermen lose their jobs because they're too fat? Back with you in a moment.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Some of your thoughts on that previous debate. Pete says, I would like a referendum on all this green future. Pete, I tell you what, most of us would like a referendum. I can't think of a subject on which Westminster is more out of touch with the public than on this whole lunacy to go for net zero, whatever the cost to ordinary people. One viewer says, we can't afford the cost of fossil fuels. Well, that's fine, whoever you are. But actually, renewables can be more expensive too. Stuart says, no, it's just a money-making machine. How much total tax in the pound does your average gullible UK working person truly pay in tax? Stuart, if we added up direct tax,